Mulholland Drive. That's right, folks. There is a reason we're talking about this one this week, and that is because we lost the legendary filmmaker, one of the most influential and important voices in modern, not even just like specifically American, just in terms of like artistry. We lost David Lynch, and I've done a whole episode of my show, The Geek Way, of talking about David Lynch. One of my personal favorite guys, just in terms of like the craftsmanship of what he pours himself into with his art. He is driven and determined, and it's not about the success or accolades. It's about having the creativity ooze out of you into something that you worked on and created. And he is just really talented in that way, in every aspect of the word. I love a lot of his work. I struggle with a lot of his work as well, and coming into this movie in particular, this is one I've struggled with before. So I do want to talk about like a couple David Lynch movies. We're going to start with this one, Mulholland Drive, which is probably his most prolific work of the modern era and one of the most prolific movies ever. Is that bad to say? This thing is a textbook on just making what you want, you know? And I appreciate that so much. But like I kind of said already, David Lynch, while he's a craftsman that I adore and admire, some of his work doesn't resonate with me. He was never one of like those guys when I was growing up. Like I'm from the era right after David Lynch kind of like made his impact. So while I have seen all of Twin Peaks and I appreciate Twin Peaks and The Return so much, some of like the more, Americana, look at like what's hiding beneath the prestigious white picket fence stuff, that never spoke to me. But I appreciate him, and he's a guy that deserves your attention, and I wanted to at least highlight some of his movies here. So we're starting with 2001's Mulholland Drive. This is a movie that has been heavily talked about and covered in multiple places. You could buy multiple different DVD or Blu-ray or 4K Criterion, whatever, just different discs of this movie, and you'll get some scrap of paper or some essay or an interview that tells you some stuff about what's going on, what was like in the mind space for Lynch when he worked on this, that kind of stuff. So I'm not going to say I have the definitive answer on this movie. I don't think there is one, and that's one of the important things about great art. Not only is it up to interpretation, it's more about the ride you're going on and being in this very specific moment as opposed to understanding everything happening around you. This is a vibes movie. This is a feeling movie. We are strapped in for whatever's coming our way and just have to bear witness to what's on screen. That is not going to be for everybody. Some people like clarity and simplicity in their stories, and I understand that. Like that is why he might be challenging for a lot of younger people. If you just don't have the attention span or dedication to be there in this moment, it's hard to sit through this movie sometimes. Not because it's like a chore. It's actually not a chore. It's very breezy and comfortable, but it's atmospheric. It's tonal. It is allowing you to believe what we're doing in this moment. And that's hard for some people. This is a dreamlike escapism movie. There are images and moments on screen that I don't know what they connect to or how they fit into everything. So don't come to this video expecting me to tell you what Mulholland Drive is about. I can't tell you that. I can tell you what I experienced while watching it, how I felt, and that's as close as I could get to giving you some sort of closure on this movie. It is an intense movie. And we're coming off of doing Gone with the Wind, which was an intense movie. This one is equally intense in different ways, and it's kind of brilliant. I've genuinely liked this movie. Like, I saw it a very long time ago. Like, I am in my late 20s now. I think I saw this when I was like 15. And when I was 15, I knew who David Lynch was. Like, I was a fan of The Elephant Man, and I kind of grew up with his Dune. But I didn't know this. Like, it just didn't hit me in any way. I'm like, this is not above my pay grade, per se, but I was like, this is going to mean something to me the more I understand the world around me. And I think that's what it was. So it's never been one that I've come back to because, Lynch isn't my guy, but watching it now for this video, I felt something really good. It made me feel stuff and just think about stuff and experience film. And that's one of my favorite things about David Lynch and how I've been honing in on his craft and like his movies in particular, just talking about them. It's all just about being there and experience what you're seeing. And you don't have to elaborate on every little thing you see happen. It just happens. So this is his Hollywood movie. This is his LA movie. It's all about living in Los Angeles. The ups, the downs, the weird diners we go to, the way people stare at you and talk about you. I can't do a David Lynch impression. That's as close as we're going to get for this video. But here you go. So we have a weird opening scene that's just like some purple background and people doing a dance. It's the jig. It comes back later. It's kind of referenced, but it's just like, here's our introduction to the world of entertainment, this really bizarre sequence. Cut to this car driving up Mulholland Drive, and this woman is in the back seat, and she is Laura Herring, and she is just about to be shot, but then another set of vehicles comes swerving by and a car hits her, so she escapes out of a car accident, gets amnesia, and stumbles into a house that may or may not be connected to somebody that she knows. It's hard to say. Then we get introduced to our other main character in Naomi Watts. She plays Betty. So Betty is a bright-eyed, bushy-tailed girl who's coming to LA with the hopes of being a big actress. And this is where you see David Lynch as a guy who's like, LA is weird, but I kind of like it here, sort of. Everyone is optimistic about this girl. She's beautiful. She's bubbly. Nobody is like cynical towards her. They just do cynical stuff with a smile on, and it's very interesting. So she's going to stay at her aunt's place, and her aunt is the homeowner where we saw Laura Herring's character go into. She has amnesia. She's taking a shower when she shows up there, so Betty starts to figure out who this girl is. She gives herself the identity of Rita because she sees a Rita Hayworth poster on the wall. So now Rita and Betty, throughout multiple moments of this movie, are going to try to solve the case of what happened to Rita's memory and who she is. That's happening over there. I love it, okay? What a weird thing to do, but it's so David Lynch. I have beautiful girls and they're not sure of themselves, but they're going to experience life. That's David Lynch, man. That's what he does. That's what he wants to talk about. He wants to get these people doing weird stuff, experiencing the world, just looking at things weird. So that's the thing going on there. There's more like Hollywood stuff going on. Two beautiful girls sharing a house, solving a case of why one can't remember anything. She has a bunch of money in a suitcase, or I guess it's her purse actually. And there's like a key that opens a thing. We'll get to the key later. Shall we just get the diner sequence out of the way? Like the key thing. Even if you haven't watched Mulholland Drive, you are probably aware of this scene. This is a scene in a diner. It's called Winky's. It is Patrick Fischler, who, a very distinctive look, and this is kind of setting up what this movie is, which is Hollyweird's a dream. It's a dreamland we live in. What's real, what's fake? So we have these two guys at a diner. One of them, Patrick Fischler, is describing a dream he had where he was in this specific diner. The guy he's talking to was standing next to the cash register, but there was like a crazy, scary guy outside of the building that he could see through the walls. And he is just like, this was weird. It's so vivid. So when the guy he's talking to goes to pay for the stuff at the counter, he's like, my dream is coming to reality. I just want to shake this weird feeling. It is a very intense sequence with a beautiful score. And the fact that the camera never sits still and is always hovering around these guys is freaking terrifying. Then we leave the diner. And the guy's like, come on, we'll just go around the corner. There's nothing's gonna be there. And you get a scary moment, or you get like a little jump scare where somebody comes out from behind the area. A homeless woman covered in dirt and soot. She just appears out of nowhere and scares this guy, and he has a heart attack. He will appear in one more sequence in this 2.5-hour movie, but that's just setting it up. Your dreams are fake, but they might be real as well. That is this movie, okay? Hold on to that for as long as you can. That is this movie. And that's not me giving you the definitive answer. But characters fall asleep when they wake up as new characters is kind of what I'm saying here. So we have, what's the other plots we have going on here? We have Justin Theroux. He's a director who's casting his new movie. This is the most, like, look at Hollywood being crazy. He's in a boardroom with a bunch of guys, old white guys. One of them has like a special request for a certain type of espresso. It's never met to his standards. But Theroux's character Adam wants to cast the lead for his new movie. And this studio or whoever, the entertainment company that he's making the movie under, it's like, you have to cast Camilla Rhodes. We're pushing her right now in this moment. She's the person you want to get in your movie. We have to have her in your movie. And that is just kind of the other thing this movie's talking about, which is the way we exploit women in Hollywood just for like a very specific moment in time. It's very real in this very specific, very uncomfortable way of, well, right now, this is who's hot. You can make this movie. You can get this movie made today with everything else you want in it. But the only choice you do not get to make is this woman. Even though you don't think she's perfect for it, everything else will work. You just have to put her in it. And he's like, I'm not selling out for that. And it leads to him kind of being stalked and berated. Literally, the company like puts a hold on his credit cards. They threaten him. He leaves his home. He goes home in an attempt to just like escape, and he finds his wife in bed with the pool man, played by Billy Ray Cyrus. And if you listen to Billy Ray Cyrus talk about this movie and this experience, he's like, well, David Lynch is probably the reason my family's fucked up a little bit because Mulholland Drive in California. Weird, but okay. So he leaves home, drops a bunch of paint in his wife's jewelry, and he goes to like a hotel, and then he gets like a call there, like he's got to meet the cowboy. And we're introduced to the cowboy. I'm going so out of order here because we're jumping around to like 3 different plot lines. But then we go see the cowboy played by Monty Montgomery, who just meets with Adam on like the top of a hill. He's like, you're going to do what I say. But I cannot do an impression of Monty Montgomery. It is the calmest, most perfect casting in this perfectly cast movie. This weird guy dressed like a weird cowboy who's like, hey, stop what you're doing. Don't be a smart aleck over here. It's incredible. It's incredible. So with Betty and Rita, we're introduced to a couple new characters. One of them is Coco, played by Ann Miller. This is another thing about David Lynch, if you know anything about him. He loves his Nepo babies, and he loves old Hollywood. So you have a legendary screen actress in one of her final roles where she like owns the grounds where Betty is staying, and she just kind of like pops in and out being like a voice of exposition. She's really great. I really like her. They try to figure out where Rita is from. So they're like calling everybody, trying to get some names. They understand like one name, which is Diane Sulin. And maybe if they have that name, they can figure out what's happening. They'll figure out who that is. But before they do that, before they figure out who Diane could be, but before they figure out who Diane is, Betty has to go to a casting call. And we get, which may be the most interesting scene in this movie, a movie full of interesting sequences. Now, Naomi Watts is an actress I don't know too much about. I think she was perfectly cast at this time as somebody who was going to blow up in a way that this movie's propping her character and other characters like her to blow up. She is so good at just playing naive. Like the first half of this movie, the first like 2/3 of this movie, she is just smiling and so trusting of everyone. She thinks Hollywood is beautiful. And then we get this really, like, we see her rehearsing lines earlier with Rita for, like, the scene she's going to go to. And you're like, oh, this is kind of fun. She's having, like, a fun, bubbly moment with, like, her new friend. They're talking about, you know, what this role is going to be and all that kind of stuff. Then we go to the casting call. And she gets in this room with, like, 5 old men, a couple of older women, and she has to, like, get into character as, like, the daughter of this old guy's best friend, and they are like secretly lovers, and she's threatening she's going to tell her parents about what he did to her. So instantly she goes from like, I'm bubbly girl, look at me, who's like a small scale person in this room, to, oh my god, I'm going to seduce this old man. It's almost all in one take, like they're acting off each other sequence. It's beautiful. It's amazing. And it's one of those things I really appreciate about a movie about Hollywood. You have an actor who's been through this stuff. Let's see them actually act good and not like act bad. It's like Emma Stone in La La Land, where she's like an intentionally okay actress. Here you're like, oh no, this person has the juice. Like Betty has the juice to actually get going here and do something fun. So everyone's like, this is going great. Like this casting, like you're perfect for this role. But then her agent or like a friend of the old guy's like, this movie's not getting made. There's no way they're going to make this thing. Don't worry, we'll get you some more roles and stuff going on. It's kind of amazing. It's kind of amazing. I should also point out that Michael J. Anderson is in this movie as Mr. Rook. And he sits in a chair with like an embellished body. And he's just kind of like, I'm in charge of Hollywood. I say what goes or what doesn't. Kind of a great role. That's the Lynch thing. It's like, what if my friend sat in a chair with a body that's not his own and said if Hollywood was working or not? That is so David Lynch. It's all David Lynch. Let's go to a diner and have a nice cup of coffee, and out back is the devil watching us as we destroy our lives. That's Lynch too. So it's how do you talk about this movie? It's just like a perfect film. Because it's just like atmospheric and being in a sequence and just like watching this camera follow people, and there's POV shots that are terrifying and real. So Rita and Betty team up to go figure out who Diane Sullivan is. So they head to like this new place, which is like this girl's house. They get into her house, kind of like breaking in, and they see her dead in her bed. They kind of leave in like a horrific moment. Because, like, what do you do from here? This is terrifying. It leads to them connecting more because Rita doesn't know what she's doing. She starts wearing, like, a blonde wig to kind of, like, mimic what Betty looks like. So it's like, if you know, it's like off a glance, you see, like, the blonde hair, and you're like, oh, that's Betty in the window or something. And then it leads to them having intimate relations in a bed because they're two people who are just naive and found trust in each other. So they do that. And that's working. Meanwhile, Adam was threatened by the cowboy, so he has to cast Camilla Rhodes in his movie. We see him like on set. Camilla walks up. You're like, wait, she looks suspiciously like Laura Herring, but it's not? Interesting. And on set, he literally sees Betty there. And he's like, hey, she's kind of hot too. But, you know, he was threatened by the movers and shakers of his movie. So he has to cast Camilla. It's pretty intense, pretty crazy. And it's straightforward. Like, this is about the first 2 hours of this film, right? It's not complicated. It is kind of like, you know, all over the place in terms of like feeling, and just hold on this for a minute. It's weird, but it makes sense. Like, the girls go see like an opera, and it's people screaming, people trapped in their lives, not sure of who they are. It's kind of a terrifying Hollywood story. And then there's a big switch that kind of happens in the middle of it, which we will get into now. Okay, not the middle. It's kind of the back half of the movie. And this is where realism is either dropped or picked up. It depends how you want to look at things. Remember when I said this is very dreamlike? Well, we see Betty kind of like have a final confrontation. So in like our final moments of Betty and Rita, they are hiding more stuff in like the place where Rita hid her money. And that's when Betty vanishes. She's no longer in the movie. Betty is gone. She is absent from our lives now. We also see later that somebody at the diner had the name Betty on, and we know that because earlier in the movie we saw somebody have the name Diane at the diner. Do with that what you will. I'm not going to give you some answer to that. So Rita takes out this box that she has a key for. She opens the box, kind of, by unlocking it, and then we get sucked into the box. Fade to black, open up. We are now with Diane Sullivan, played by Naomi Watts. So, this is the big turning point of the movie, and you can theorize whatever you want. Was the first 2 hours of this film a dream that Diane was having, kind of like the dream that Patrick Fischler was having at the beginning, where he was feeling something so real and it's like trying to get these emotions out of you? Or is this now the dream where Betty is taking the world, like what she learned about Diane and Camilla and like the experience of Hollywood, and now she's dreaming that she has this better life with Rita? It's up to you how you interpret it. The fact that one of the characters that we've seen throughout the whole movie has amnesia makes it a little harder to understand. But then Diane and Camilla is played by Laura Herring now, they are in a very passionate sexual relationship. They are working on the same movie, and there's like some weird connection going on between Camilla and Adam. Adam is the director of this piece, and Camilla tries to break it off with Diane so they're not together because she is going to marry Adam in some intense way. And it just kind of like keeps going into, what is this reality now? Is this real? What is any of this? We see they're going to have a party on Mulholland Drive. Diane's headed there. She gets stopped in like a scene very similar to the scene at the beginning of the movie where Rita's character is stopped and was going to get shot. She gets stopped, and then Camilla comes out of the bushes and takes her up to the party. They have a nice dinner. We see a lot of the characters from earlier on, including Ann Miller is at this party now. She's no longer like the person who owns the house. And the neighbor who lived next to Diane in like the Rita and Betty reality, she was in Diane's actual place because her and Diane swapped places to live, and that still is happening in this reality too. So everyone who's kind of like a mover and shaker in like the Hollywood side, like the producers, the older men, the older actors that we saw, they are all now here at this thing, at this big party. And when Diane hears that Camilla's going to marry Adam, she gets upset. And then we go back to the diner. Then this sequence at the diner is where she sees the name tag Betty, and she is talking to the hitman who is it Scott Coffey? I can't remember who played the hitman. He's like the dumb looking blonde guy who like assassinated people earlier in the movie. There was like the bigger woman who he had to like strangle and then kill the guy with the vacuum cleaner. She's going to hire him to kill Camilla. And she has like a weird sense of stuff going on in the cafe or diner, I suppose. So when she leaves, we leave the diner. We start to follow like where the homeless woman was living. And she gives us like the weird box. And there's the key. And somebody else had the key. So now we have the box. The homeless lady has the box. And she puts it into like a paper bag. And she throws the bag on the ground, and like little small people run out of it. And it's the old couple from the earlier in the movie when we saw Betty getting off the plane. There was like an old couple, and it's them, and they start to haunt Diane, and atmospheric stuff happens. Do you see what's happening here? We're getting a little heady, aren't we? It's a lot, and I think it, for the most part, it did a good job of like being, well, there's nothing weird and out of place here until like the little people come out of a bag and start like tormenting Diane. That's when things get a little crazy, per se. But that's Hollywood, baby. Things getting weird. And the movie just kind of like sits on its characters, digesting the stuff that happened to them. And then it just kind of ends with like this feeling of, oh, I think Diane lost her mind or ended up in a bad place. And that is a feeling that one can get from this movie. It's really good, and describing it doesn't do this movie justice. How do you describe this movie? How do you experience this movie? You just have to be there with it. It is dreamlike. I keep coming back to that. That's like my big thing about this movie. I guess that'd be like my takeaway is like, there is the world that you live in and the world that you want to live in. And the two mesh together, sort of. The thing that happens is you get lost in the delusion you create in your mind of what you think Hollywood is and what you think your reality should be in this industry. It's just kind of, nothing is ever going to go the way you want it to. Things are going to be stuck and repetitive. And for a moment you will be on top, and in the next moment you're not. And there are metaphors of opera and dreams and just the swelling of music and the drowning out of noise around you that just leaves you confused and alone and isolated. And people use you and they use each other, and nothing ever comes out on top. But at the end of the day, Billy Ray Cyrus cucked a guy in this movie. And that's something to hold on to. It's Mulholland Drive. We talked about it. I think this movie is fantastic. I'm still going to be thinking about it for a while. It is one of those ones that just sits with you and makes you revel in its interest. And that's kind of a cool thing to experience in a movie like this. I appreciate what we're doing here. It is complicated, but easy. It is simplistic, but over-designed. It's brilliant. And that's what you can say about it. And that's what you can say about David Lynch as a creator. He's a brilliant guy who's trying things and experiencing things and knew what he was doing. Even if it's not for you, hey, he made what he wanted. And that's kind of impressive in today's climate. So we will be back to talk another David Lynch movie. I'm not sure which one yet. I have some ideas, but this is one of the most prolific films of the 21st century. If you haven't seen it, I do recommend checking it out. Just sit with it. Take some time to let it sink into your being. Thank you all for watching this episode. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. As always, you can check me out on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. And of course, I will catch you in the next one. Have fun. Stay safe. Good luck.